Minister, first of all, what is the government precisely looking for at today's Council meeting in relation to the EU-Israel Association Agreement?
Look, really pleased to be in Luxembourg here with colleagues for a discussion on quite a number of really important issues at a really important time. Firstly, our engagement with Foreign Minister Sibi from Russia. It's really important as an EU that we make progress on the €90 billion loan, that we make progress on the 20th package of sanctions, and that we're able to exert as much pressure as possible on Russia. I was in Ukraine with a number of colleagues in recent weeks, and what's very clear is that we are at that breaking point where that loan is absolutely essential. I also had the pleasure of speaking to my new foreign colleague in Hungary in the last few days, Foreign Minister Orban, and I welcome the position that they have taken, and I hope that we will see the release of funds, but importantly as well the move to the 20th package of sanctions. Sanctions are working. We need to keep that pressure on Russia. In terms of the situation in the Middle East, and specifically when it comes to the letter that myself and my Spanish and my Slovenian colleague have written to the High Commissioner today, we are very clear. We need to, as an EU, uphold our fundamental values, and we need to be clear for countries that we associate with, where we have agreements with, that they are upholding those fundamental values and laws. Israel has, since our last meeting, enacted a new law which essentially introduces the death penalty, but in particular penalises and specifically targets Palestinian people. It's completely unacceptable, and so we have asked for a suspension of the Israeli agreement, if not then a suspension on the trade elements of the Israeli agreement, and we would be seeking to have this not just as a discussion here today at the Council, but that there would be some clear actions at the next Council meeting. What's very clear, and our position in Ireland has been consistent for many years now, we need to move in unison. We believe that where the EU moves together, that we have a greater impact, and that's why I'll be calling on all of our colleagues today to support our call for the suspension of the overall agreement, but at the very least, if we can't reach that full agreement, that we would have suspension of the overall trade elements of it. We are witnessing and experiencing an unprecedented and an unacceptable escalation of violence in the West Bank. There are 34 new settlements that have been agreed to in recent weeks with the introduction of the death penalty. We have an increase in violence across the region. We have a very clear determination by the Israeli government to separate into two the West Bank. We also now have what can be only seen as unacceptable decrease in humanitarian aid into Gaza as well. So we need to act. We need to make sure that our fundamental values are protected, and we need to make sure that any agreement that we have with any other country, that that country is fulfilling and upholding their obligations to.
Do you detect any shift in sentiment among some of those countries that have tenaciously supported Israel in recent years, and how significant do you think the Hungarian election has been in that regard?
Look, I think it's very clear that there has been a shift. I think we've heard from EU leaders in recent weeks a very clear dissatisfaction and annoyance at the actions that Israel have taken. You'll see from other colleagues outside of Ireland, Slovenia and Spain proposals by other member states as to how we can respond, particularly in the West Bank. So I think we need to today be decisive in our desire to take action against a country that is very clearly violating human rights, that is very clearly taking measures that are targeting specifically innocent civilians and Palestinians, and we need to be clear in making sure that there is an agreement to move forward on this. Ireland has consistently said we would be far better if we move in unison, if we move collectively together, and that's what I hope we can achieve today. In terms of the elections in Hungary, look, I think the soundings, if not the soundings, the actual communication from the incoming government has been very clear. They want to work with the EU, and that's certainly the feeling and the sentiment that I got speaking to the new Foreign Minister Orban. They also are very clear that the agreement that was reached on the €90 billion loan, that was already agreed by foreign ministers, by EU leaders, and we need to be able to move on that as quickly as possible. My engagement with Foreign Minister Sibi, with President Zelensky in Ukraine in recent weeks, really it just highlighted the perilous situation they are in, the need for this €90 billion loan, not just from a defence perspective, but to invest in critical infrastructure that has consistently been damaged by Russia, where they are completely putting aside any respect for fundamental human rights.
On the Israel situation, Is it conceivable we could get a decision today, perhaps, on excluding Israel from the Horizon funding programme?
Look, I'm not sure whether we'll reach agreement on certain specific issues today, but I really do hope that we can make sure that at the next agenda there are some clear actionable items on our agenda, whether it's Horizon funding, whether it's the suspension of the Israeli-EU association agreement, whether it's specific to trade or otherwise, or whether we can focus on banning goods, full stop, in the West Bank. So I hope that we will get to a point where there is an agreement to take action and to respond to what have been completely unacceptable actions. If I could also say that I really welcome the fact that we will have the Lebanese Prime Minister today. I think Irish people will be well aware of the importance that Ireland places on the need for a sustainable peace in the Lebanon. Our troops have been there for many decades and have contributed to that peace, and what we've seen in recent weeks because of the actions of Israel, but Hezbollah of course as well, is a setback of many, many decades. And so I welcome the current ceasefire. I welcome the fact that we are hopefully going to see further talks between Israel and Lebanon, but it's really important for me that we as an EU express our solidarity and our support with the Lebanese government and for their right to their sovereignty and to protect their country and their civilians, many of whom have been unfairly targeted, have been killed in recent weeks and have been displaced in the millions.
Just in light of the underreporting of US military overflights in Ireland, is there any prospect that the government could seek prior approval from the government to the US military if those flights are indeed linked to the Gulf War?
Look, we have a long-standing position in the Department of Foreign Affairs of publishing statistics. That has been the case for many, many years, and unfortunately due to an administrative error that has not happened for certain flights. Once this was brought to my attention, it's been immediately rectified and the statistics have been published. We have again a very clear position, and it's been, I think, well understood by everybody, including the US, for many decades now, and that position has not changed. So any flight that is due to fly overhead, that's due to land, where there are munitions, where there are personnel, where there is any engagement, any type of conflict, it's simply not allowed, it's simply not accepted, and that's something that is known widely by all countries, and it's not going to change.
But a 56% increase in the number of flights over Ireland since the war began, it's hardly conceivable that had nothing those flights had nothing to do with the military action in the Gulf.
Our position is very well known by the US, by every country, and indeed we've taken and have had in place for many decades a similar position that's now been taken by Spain and other countries as well. So we are very clear, if you are flying overhead, if there is any type of landing, it is not possible and it's not within our rules and our guidelines that you can have military personnel, that you're engaged in any type of conflict, and we restate that position, but I do believe it's very well known by the US and by other countries as well.
Has that been specifically communicated to the US in recent days or weeks?
This has been the case for many decades. This is something that has been communicated over those decades, and it's well known and well understood, and we expect that it is accepted, but also that it is followed through and it's adhered to by all countries, including the US.
Minister, can I ask a question about Georgia? Today we also discuss Georgian situation in Georgia. What will be your message to people also who are standing on the streets and fighting for European future?
Look, I think it's really important that we have this on the agenda today. It's really important that we continue to work with our colleagues in Georgia and within the wider region, and that we continue to support that path towards the European Union. We have many Georgian citizens in Ireland as well, and we work closely with the community, but we need to make sure that we are engaged, and where there are challenges that are very clearly emerging, that we're working with the government and that we remain focused on making sure that the reforms and the changes that need to happen, that is prioritised within the government as well.
Thank you.